South Carolina quarterback LaNorris Sellers torched the Tigers defense for 160 yards rushing, including a touchdown on 3rd and 15 to put the Gamecocks ahead with just 1 minute and 8 seconds remaining.
Time for Sellers. Eludes the pressure. There he goes. LaNorris Sellers again to the end zone. He made it.
With under a minute left, Cade Klubnik drove Clemson to the 20-yard line, but Demetrius Knight Jr. intercepted a deflected pass, securing a 17-14 victory for number 14 South Carolina at Memorial Stadium.
2 plays before a potential field goal attempt. Klubnik buys some time. It wasn't picked up. Was it intercepted? It was. Knight picked it up.
After losing 2 of the last 3 games in the rivalry, the Tigers now shift focus to SMU in the ACC Championship, with the college football playoff spot at stake.
3rd and 13, Fields does have time, and now takes off, makes a cut. It's a hard hit by Skalski, who knocks him down 2 yards short, and Fields is still down.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 15 of the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show. I'm Drew Archer, and as always, I'm joined by Matthew Johnson. How's it going, Matthew?
It's good. I just got back from first time being back in Clemson since graduating, so that's fun. And also, I'll just go ahead and apologize for 2 things. I went to a concert last night, and so my ears are still ringing. If the audio sounds a little different this episode, that's why. And then also, that's why my voice might be a little scratchy.
Who'd you go see?
So they're like smaller artists. The opener was this guy named Quedeca. I've been following him for a little while. And then headliner was Gene Dawson. He makes kind of like genre. It's like hard to define it in a genre. Very kind of like rock, rap, all over the place, really. Like his newer album even has like, I don't know, like kind of like 80s disco style kind of still. Like it's hard to pin down. So yeah, it was a great show. I had a great time. How did your weekend go? Aside from Saturday, obviously.
Well, just the whole week of Thanksgiving was tiring. I don't feel like I got any rest. Got up at the butt crack of dawn Saturday morning to go out and tailgate. I think I set my alarm for 4:30 Saturday morning and didn't get much rest the rest of the weekend. So rolling back into the work week sleepy. But it was a big weekend, as to be expected with rivalry weekend. A lot of big games, a lot of big rivalry games. Before we get into the Clemson-South Carolina game, we'll hit a couple of the bigger games. This one, I was planning on going to bed early Saturday or Friday night because I had to get up so early Saturday. But this Georgia Tech game was so entertaining. Georgia Tech, they fought their hardest, falling. I believe it was 8 overtimes to Georgia, 44-42. Did you get a chance to watch this one?
I, too, stayed up way too late watching this game on Friday night, especially knowing we just left from Anderson, though, so it wasn't a horrible drive. I think I woke up at like 6 on Saturday to get there, so it was a little better for me, but still staying up past midnight to watch just the heartbreak of the century until Saturday. There's a bigger heartbreak happening. But yeah, that was a great game. I was staying with my girlfriend's family some for Thanksgiving, and her little sister is a sophomore at UGA right now. And I was like, doesn't UGA play tomorrow? And she was like, yeah, it's just Georgia Tech though. And I was like, I don't know. Yeah, you might want to worry about this one a little bit.
I think we talked about that a little bit last week. That it might have been one of your picks that Georgia Tech was gonna make it tough for the Bulldogs this past weekend.
It was a pick, and I mean, spoiler, I went 4-0 on picks, and yeah, that was one of them.
Yeah, I was bummed when I logged in and looked at how the weekend shook out, and you got all 4 of your picks right. Another big rivalry series. We did not see it because I believe it was at the same time as the Clemson-South Carolina game, but Michigan-Ohio State, law enforcement had to break out the pepper spray in the post-game activities.
Obviously, we didn't watch it, but it's crazy how much Michigan owns Ryan Day. It's like, this is the year, and I think we even talked about this last week heading into the game, like this is the year that Ohio State is clearly better than Michigan. My dad was talking this weekend, like they probably shelled out, or they're like $20 million deep in their roster for just this year. Michigan, new head coach, first-year head coach, lost your Heisman winning quarterback, or I guess Caleb Williams won. Did J.J. McCarthy win Heisman?
No, it was Caleb Williams.
Okay, yeah. Well, Heisman finalist quarterback. was going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. All of that in 1 year, and Ohio State still finds a way to lose to Michigan. So this reminds me almost of like the hump that Dabo had to get over with Steve Spurrier. He never ended up getting over it and never beat Steve Spurrier, but
he beat him.
Was it 2014 Spurrier's last year?
He beat him at least once.
Or maybe 2009 or...
Yeah, I think it was either the first or second meeting, and then he didn't get to play Steve Spurrier the final season because if I remember correctly, Steve Spurrier just quit in the middle of the year.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. That whole saga is a blur to me. But also another one similar to that is Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. And Kirby Smart still can't get over the Alabama hump without Nick Saban there either. So kind of similar things there, but it's hard for a Ohio State coach to keep his job for very long if he can't beat Michigan.
And we might revisit that topic a little later. And then a game that was of big importance, one I've been talking about for 2 weeks, Miami at Syracuse. Syracuse does the unthinkable, beats Miami. Clemson backs their way into an ACC championship as a result.
Stumbles their way into it. They are falling upwards.
Yeah.
Like just the difference in joy where like obviously you come out of that game dejected, and then just a little while later you find out, oh, you're still going to get to go play for a conference championships. Like, I don't know, it was a roller coaster of a day. This game is the reason we're having a full episode this week. It's probably going to be a shorter one if Clemson wasn't in the ACC Championship game. And I don't know, Drew, if you saw this clip after the game and the post game on the field, Syracuse's head coach was like, I forget exactly what he said. He was like, I got you in, baby, or like, that one's for you, Dabo, or something like that.
Yeah. Dabo was asked about it today in his weekly press conference. He says, I can guarantee you this, that if Clemson wins the national championship, he will be in the convertible with me in the championship parade. So, yeah, Syracuse helping out the Tigers going to Charlotte. In that immediate reaction, my brother was like mad. He was so dejected from the game. He was like, I did not want to care for Clemson one more week. I'm over Clemson football in 2024. And you and I were texting back and forth. I had been approved for media credentials and was going to always go regardless of whether Clemson was in it or not. And then after the game Saturday, I was like, I have no desire to go to this game. And then I found out Clemson was there, and you shoot me that text, and you're like, well, don't cancel your credentials now. So I will be in Charlotte Saturday night this weekend as a result.
Yeah, I'm glad you're sticking that one out. I did want to also say my dad was kind of in a similar mindset right after the South Carolina game where he's like, I don't even want, like, they should just forfeit the ACC championship game. Like, we don't deserve it. And it did feel like that because we were, like, stumbling into this success.
And then it could be a lose-lose situation, too. Like, you win, you get into the playoff, you get embarrassed by someone, you lose to a first-year program in the Atlantic Coast Conference. It's never been in a Power Four conference. So, I don't know. We'll see. Before we break down the Clemson-South Carolina game, we got to shout out our loyal sponsor for the last 2 seasons, and that's Pump Monkey Septic Service. Give Alan Powell and the folks at Pump Monkey a call. He lives here in the upstate. He services the upstate. Clemson alumni still serving the community of Clemson. So if you need your septic tank checked out, potentially need it pumped, give them a call at 864-710-2211. Best in the business, Pump Monkey. Again, 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey. All right. Do we have to talk about this game?
I mean, we don't have to. I guess nobody's going to hold us accountable.
Yeah. So Tigers fall for the second time in 3 seasons, both at home, both noon games. Before I get to like some of these stats, what's your initial thought? Because personally, I've tried to already push this game out of my mind. I haven't thought about it since I left the stadium Saturday. I'm just trying to put this one behind me and bury the tape.
Yeah, I mean, getting into the game, I really wasn't expecting Clemson to be like super competitive in this game, let alone lead the entire game. Was it 59 minutes of the game? And
Pretty much.
Yeah. So it's better than I was expected. The worst part to me was getting stuck in the line at the top of the stadium and having to just stand there and watch all the South Carolina fans and players on the field. And I don't know if we ever got any like follow up. I was avoiding it too. If we got any follow up, if there was like player scuffles happening on the field afterwards, because I saw the ACC sent down some fines to a couple teams this week for their post game antics.
I saw a headline where Dabo addressed it. I didn't quite read his quote, but it did say he's going to be in communication with Shane Beamer at South Carolina and discuss some things and that kind of stuff. But I really hadn't heard anything about it. Yeah, the lines on Saturday were terrible. Literally leaving the stadium because we got stuck in our seat because every other aisle was exiting. I don't know what was wrong with ours. And then getting into the stadium, that might have been the most people trying to get into the stadium at one time that I've ever experienced. I was literally like, my chest was on this random dude in front of me the whole time. Like everybody was shoulder to shoulder. Standing there having to watch all that after you losing the way that you do, that was not fun.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you had that interception that really sealed the game that you mentioned in the intro. And like they never showed a replay of that in the stands. It looked like it could have been incomplete, but obviously it was like an expedited review because there wasn't anything. But they just didn't show it to the crowd, and that was a little frustrating too because it just seemed like, oh, a lot of us saw that could have been incomplete, and like we're just skipping right past it. But
yeah,
LaNorris Sellers has to get a huge shout out on this episode. He played amazing. I'm just not sure that South Carolina has the money to keep him in Columbia for his entire college career. I feel like he's going to be a hot commodity in the transfer portal. Going to be a lot of tampering with him, trying to get him to come play with them.
I would love to see that. Carolina fans just all about him this year. He brings them success. He's a tremendous athlete, and then somebody just buys him and snatches him away. I would love nothing more than that to happen.
It'd be like Juice Wells again. And I mean, like if Juice Wells was there this past week, it would have been even worse because they would have had more offensive threats. So like I just think that's going to be a common theme for South Carolina as the years go on, is they're just going to be one of those programs that they'll have success in recruiting and developing players early, but once they have that breakout season, they're gone. So
yeah.
As far as like the X's and O's of the game go, I liked what Clemson brought scheme-wise. Like it seemed to work. Maffa obviously wasn't 100%, and you could tell very easily. They really neutralized the South Carolina pass rush, and that was what I might have been most worried about heading into this game, is Clemson even having time to get the ball off. I don't even know if South Carolina had a sack.
At least one.
But I was expecting it to be like that Auburn Clemson game from 2012 or 2013. Wait, no, that was 2017. That was later, where there was like 12 total combined sacks in that game. So yeah, overall, like I think since my attitude heading into the week was Clemson's gonna lose, I'm just going there to experience Clemson again and have fun. So I had a good time either way.
It was a good time. I'll say getting out there as early as we did, it being 28 degrees, tailgating, that was a little rough first thing in the morning. Commented on the end of last week's episode. Now, it was kind of depressing how neither of us were picking Clemson. We had no hope going into this game. And I think that's why I felt so bad after the fact. I didn't think that Clemson was going to win the game. Then Clemson gave me hope. And then you lay an egg in the second half, don't score a point, and lose the way you did. So a few stats from the game. Clemson dropped to 33-44 and 4 all-time against the Gamecocks. Cade Klubnik completed 24 of 36 passes for 280 yards with 10 carries for 62 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Antonio Williams recorded game highs in receptions with 8 and receiving yards, 99. TJ Moore gained 65 yards on a career-high 6 receptions. The game was Clemson's 61st of Dabo Swinney's head coaching tenure, in which the Tigers have recorded at least 3 takeaways. The Tigers dropped to 59-2 in those contests. The turnover margin was big, and at one point Clemson was leading at 3-1, and you don't get any points off any of those turnovers. TJ Parker ended South Carolina's first drive when he recorded a strip sack. The sack was Parker's 10th of the season, and he became the first Clemson player to reach double-digit sacks in a season since Cleveland Ferrell did it in 2018. Sammy Brown recorded his 5th sack of the season, forcing Sellers out of bounds for a loss on the first quarter scramble. Sammy also became the 4th Clemson player on record to record 5 or more sacks as a true freshman. He joined Dexter Lawrence, Tyler Davis, TJ Parker. South Carolina entered the game ranked third in the nation with 39 sacks this season, but Clemson outsacked the Gamecocks 3-1 on Saturday. Tigers dropped to 144-5 since 2011 when leading after 3 quarters. I mentioned that turnover margin. Tigers won that 3-2, and then Clemson dropped to 120-2 in its last 122 games while holding teams under 23 points. That dates back to 2010. That other loss came against Georgia and Charlotte a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the stats tell a good story for Clemson, and it's like a good mark on the season stat-wise. I really enjoyed TJ Parker's, I don't know if you noticed, or I think I pointed it out to some of us who were sitting up at the top, that a couple times after he got a sack, he would like get up and start doing like a little chicken dance.
Oh, yeah.
That was funny, and I mean, I like that the players, is TJ Parker even from South Carolina? Like,
I'm not sure.
If he's not, it's nice that players are at least like getting into the rivalry, even if they're not. So, yeah, heartbreaking loss, heartbreaking end to the regular season.
Yeah, there's still more football to be played. And one thing on your comment about whether he's from South Carolina or not and kind of buying into the rivalry, that's something that I've thought over the last few years, that these rivalry games are not quite as intense and the players don't have as much buy-in, because now with college football, people are traveling across the country to come play at a school that they have no allegiance to, don't know anything about, and the history and that kind of stuff. So that was definitely on full display this weekend across the country with all the rivalry games and scuffles and everything that went down.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It was great to see as a football fan. And fact check, TJ Parker's from Phoenix City, Alabama.
Phoenix City, Alabama. Tigers get a lot of guys from Alabama.
Phoenix City specifically. E.J. Williams and Justin Ross are from Phoenix City. But that's just like right on the border of Georgia. It's basically a pipeline state.
Yeah.
Twitter polls.
All right. Twitter poll of the week. As always, follow us at Nachos_analysis on Twitter. This week's question was, what does Clemson have to accomplish to make up for their loss to South Carolina? The options are ACC Championship, playoff win, national championship, or nothing, because a loss to South Carolina is inexcusable. Before Matthew and I give our results, a couple listener responses. Matthew, do you know how to pronounce this name? M-I-D-D-A? Mida?
I would have thought it was Mida or Mida.
Mida.
I don't know, though.
We're going to go Mida. Sorry, Mr. Mitchell, if I pronounced it wrong. But Mida Mitchell, losing to them is always unacceptable, even with a national championship. I agree. Kimberly gets in and she says all of the above. And then Gerald Johnson gets in and says ACC Championship is a must to begin the conversation. Making a run to the Final Four would do it for me. As in the movie Major League, might as well win the whole damn thing. All right. What are your thoughts here, Matthew?
Going into it, I was kind of on the same page as Gerald, because one playoff win would make it up for me personally, and to do that, you have to win the ACC Championship. I don't think Clemson's getting in as a 4 loss. Clemson has to win the ACC Championship and win at least one playoff game. But Mida did bring up a very good point. Even if Clemson wins the playoffs, wins a national championship, there's still going to be South Carolina fans bringing up, we beat you that same year, you won a national championship, who's the real national champion? So I think I'm leaning towards nothing. It's inexcusable, because anytime, I even said that last week, anytime you lose to South Carolina is inexcusable.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this one too. And you referenced Dabo's early struggles when facing South Carolina. Clemson was going to BCS bowl games and winning a lot of big-time games, but they could not get over that hump and beat South Carolina, and it's still, you remember they left sour taste in our mouth. So I'm also going nothing. It's inexcusable. The way the poll shook out, again, the question was, what does Clemson have to accomplish to make up for the loss to South Carolina? National championship got 7% of the vote. 23% of the people that voted agree with you and I. Nothing is inexcusable. ACC championship with 34%, and a close one, 36% a playoff win will help reconcile this loss in the minds of Tiger fans.
Fact or fiction?
Fact or fiction, South Carolina has caught up to and is passing Clemson in terms of skill and coaching.
I hesitated when responding to this because of the second part and is passing Clemson in terms of skill and coaching. But then as I think about it, the current trajectory show South Carolina is going to be a playoff team in the next 2 to 3 years, I would bet. And Clemson is going, at this rate, is just going to be a bubble team or slowly fade into oblivion where you're never in the national conversation again. So I'm going to say fact reluctantly. Who was that South Carolina announcer that said that Clemson was cycling out in like 2015 or something?
Ellis. Todd Ellis.
Yeah. He's like, they're cycling out and we're cycling in, but he might have just been like 10 years too early.
Yeah. I forgot about cycling out. I'm gonna say fiction. This is just one season, but if you start to string along 2 and 3 more seasons like this, you're able to keep your guys from getting poached in the transfer portal, continue to recruit and develop your guys, then they are in a good trajectory to pass Clemson. But as of now, I say fiction. Fact or fiction, Ryan Day will not be Ohio State's coach in 2025.
I'm saying fiction only because I feel like Ryan Day's agent is bringing in the Dabo Swinney case law of losing to South Carolina 5 or 6 times in a row and then going on your own streak. Like, it takes time to build a program, but Ryan Day walked into a palace with recruits, access, money. There's no excuse why you should be losing to Michigan as much as you do.
He was born on third base and tells everybody he hit a home run.
Exactly.
I think it depends on how Ohio State finishes this season. They go on, win a national title, he'll be fine. But you have a poor showing against Penn State in your conference championship game, get bounced early in the playoff, then in fact, I think he could get fired because that rivalry, just like the Iron Bowl, they care about beating the rival. So,
and sorry, I'm just a quick correction. The Big Ten or Big whatever they are championship game is Oregon and Penn State. Ohio State is not in the championship game. They're just a bubble team hoping to make it as an at-large.
That's right. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that changes your answer at all.
It also is a very close line from what I'm remembering too. I would have thought Oregon would be favored more.
Yeah, I agree.
Fact or fiction, if Clemson wins the ACC, SMU is eliminated from the playoffs.
I'm going to say fact. Like, that's my prediction of what's going to happen, but they shouldn't be. The, like, whole SEC bias has, like, crept into the media so predominantly that it's just overrun. Even the people who are making the polls are relying on these like SEC bias information to even make your polls. But like a 3-loss South Carolina team has a better chance of getting in than a 2-loss SMU team to me. SMU with a loss to BYU, who's another bubble team, and then hypothetical one to Clemson in the ACC Championship Game. I think they should still get in, but I don't think they will.
Yeah. We are recording this on Tuesday prior to the new rankings coming out. I'm interested to see where South Carolina moves up to. I'm going to say that is fiction, that SMU is already in the playoff. Partly you were referencing the SEC. Greg Sankey, the commissioner of SEC, he's been on record multiple times pushing that you should not be disqualified for having to play an additional game because of how well you performed throughout the regular season. And it is of his opinion, the czar of the SEC, that if you make your conference championship game, then you should not be penalized for losing it. So I kind of like that mindset. If not, then you go from a conference that 2 weeks ago could potentially have 3 teams in SMU, Clemson, and Miami to then maybe only 1 team.
Weekly picks.
All right, time to review our picks From last week, we touched on it earlier. Matthew had a perfect weekend. I went 3 of 4, which brings our season total back tied at 32 points. Matthew still has one of his preseason picks, so he's technically ahead by 1 at this point in the season. I think we might need to lay out the rules for our punishment maybe next week.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I think we're on the same page, though. I think we're leaning towards the same option, but
yeah.
With that preseason pick, we'll touch on it a little bit after we give out our picks for this week, but we'll give a little update on that. And Drew's still fighting, even though his over and under aren't going to hit.
Yeah, my over-under picks were terrible.
It's all good. You have, I think 7 playoff teams still in contention to make the playoffs, so that's a lot of points to add in there. But I remember saying on last week's episode that picking rivalry games is kind of hard, and we talked about that teams are just going to play a little bit harder against certain teams. I didn't make it look that way this past week.
Yeah, Michigan-Ohio State was the only game that I missed on. They let me down. I took the over at 43.5. I can't even remember what the score. That was a pretty low-scoring game.
Yeah. Drew, I have a favor. So I have 2 underdog picks for Week 15. Would you mind giving your underdog pick first or reading it off first? And then if you have one of those 2 games, I'll pick the other one.
Yeah, I guess that's fair because you always have to go first.
So yeah, I have 2 that I'm still kind of torn on, and I'm not sure which one I want to go with. So your underdog might influence my decision.
Okay, yeah. We'll go same order except for underdog.
Okay, perfect. With that, then we can jump into favorite, and I am going to the Big 12 championship game. That is Arizona State. They're 2.5 or just a 2-point favorite right now over Iowa State, and I think Arizona State is one of the hottest teams in the country right now. Their last loss was on the middle of October by a 10 to Cincinnati, and they've won every game except for 2 since then by 10 or more. So I think Arizona State is rolling in hot in this game.
I picked that game for a different pick. We'll get to that in a minute. But I am going with the game we mentioned a moment ago, Oregon against Penn State in the Big Ten Championship. Oregon, a 3.5-point favorite. I've been on record, I don't know how many times Penn State can't win big games, and I don't expect that to change this weekend.
Yeah, I really like that one. I might like that pick better than mine.
Oh, this is where we're going here. Well, you can go ahead and give out your pick because you definitely did not pick this one.
Oh, you don't know. Just go ahead.
No, I know for a fact because I took Iowa State as a 2-point underdog to Arizona State.
Okay. Yeah,
mathematically impossible for us to pick the same one there.
Okay, I definitely did not pick that, so we're good there. That doesn't make my decision any easier though for what I want to do. I'm just gonna randomly pick one for my underdog. I'm going. I'll tell you what my other one was too. Don't worry, guys. I'm going Ohio. They're plus 2.5 versus Miami of Ohio. Ohio has won 5 in a row to end the season, all by 17 or more. Their last loss was to Miami of Ohio, and it was only by 10. So I think they're rolling in high and can make up for that this week.
And it's hard to beat the same team twice in a season.
Which that is another thing, was my other underdog potential was UGA plus 2.5 versus Texas, because it opened as a pick'em and has moved towards Texas. But I mean, Georgia really handled business against Texas last time, so it would be hard to see Texas improve that much throughout the season. So
yeah, I considered that for my underdog as well.
Yeah, that's what I was between, but I instead picked it for my over. The line right now is 49.5. Georgia's defense is allowing a ton of points right now. They 42 to Georgia Tech, and then the game before that 21 to UMass, and those were meaningful snaps to UMass too. It wasn't like UMass scored in the end. UMass was keeping up in the first quarter. I think that one's going to be a little higher scoring than, what was it, like 34-3 or something that we saw earlier.
Yep. I am picking the ACC Championship for my over. SMU is averaging the second most points per game in the ACC. Clemson, the fourth most. And I don't know. I could see Cade Klubnik getting hot this week, especially with the matchup of our receivers and their DBs. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, so I think there's going to be some points in this game.
Yeah, I really considered that one too. That was in my notes as a potential pick. But lastly, my under is that favorite game that you had, the Big Ten Championship game, Penn State versus Oregon. And it's the same line as the UGA-Texas game, 49.5. I just think that one's going to be more defensive. Penn State usually doesn't allow a ton of points.
Yeah. And you and I are going head-to-head on a couple games this weekend, which is going to make it – big point swing is going to happen this weekend because I'm going Georgia-Texas under 49.5 for this one.
Okay, interesting. Maybe Georgia's defense will figure something out, and, obviously they had a good game plan the first time against Texas, but that one kind of feels like an anomaly. It could just be a completely different game this time around.
Yeah, and, again, it's hard to beat the same team twice, so I'm expecting, hopefully, Texas to perform a little bit better.
Yeah, probably. And like I mentioned, we're going to just quickly review our preseason picks again. I know we did it halfway through the season, but as I mentioned, Drew still has 7 playoff teams in contention: Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Penn State. Maybe Miami is looking on the outside looking in right now, but I think they're still in contention at least. So it wasn't quick to mark them off. But like we said, Drew's over pick of Michigan at 9.5 wins for the season did not hit.
Flop.
Under for SMU, 8.5 did not hit. He still has Ohio State as the national champion, which is still potential. So that one could be big. My over-under, I had Colorado. We talked about it almost every week. Colorado plus 5.5. They're at 9 wins now. Under Missouri, they finished the regular season with 9 wins. So it all depends on the bowl game here of whether or not that pick is going to hit for me. And I have 5 teams left in my preseason playoff predictions that are still in contention: Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Penn State, and Texas. I had my national champion as Georgia, which I still think is a good possibility too. So just a little update on preseason picks.
We've talked about this ad nauseum too, but the door's wide open for 4 or 5 teams to win a national championship. Ohio State could do it. Georgia could do it. Texas could do it. Oregon. It's not like a lot of these seasons when you're going into a 14 playoff and everybody kind of knows Alabama's probably going to win it this year. All right, time to preview the ACC matchup with Clemson and SMU. This is the first all-time meeting between the two programs. The Tigers opened as a 1.5 point favorite. As I sit here today, Tuesday at 6:15 p.m., that has shifted. SMU went from a 1.5 point underdog to a 2.5 point favorite. Over-under is currently at 56.5. SMU coming into the championship game, their first as a member of the ACC. Their record there is 11-1. Their only loss came to BYU. As Matthew mentioned earlier, they fell to BYU 18-15. Their best win so far this season, they got a win over Pitt and Louisville, 2 common opponents with Clemson. They went 2-0 with those 2 teams. Tigers 1-1. One thing I did want to point out that could come into play when the selection committee is trying to figure out how to evaluate the ACC championship. If Clemson were to win, at the strength of schedule for SMU, 57th in the country. Clemson not much better at 53. Tigers are attempting to win a postseason game for the 14th consecutive year. That includes bowl games, conference championships, national championships. Clemson's current 13-year streak is the longest streak on record in major college football history. Clemson is facing its 8th different opponent all time in 10 ACC championship games. They face North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Miami, Pitt, Virginia, and Notre Dame that 2020 season when the Irish joined for a season so they could play football that year. Tigers are 8-1 all-time in ACC championship games, including wins in each of its last 8 appearances after falling to Georgia Tech. That first time they have not lost the ACC championship game since. So the Tigers have had a lot of success in Charlotte, and that one random year it happened to be in Orlando. Tigers' winning percentage in ACC championship games is .889 or 88%. In conference title games, the second highest nationally of any team that has appeared in a minimum of 4 conference title games. What are our thoughts heading into this game? Because I'm going to be quite honest, the only SMU game I think I've watched this season was when they played Florida State, like week 2 or 3. and I can't take anything from that because Florida State's hot garbage.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched a ton of SMU this year. I've kept them on and kept an eye on them passively, but as your preseason pick suggests, I don't know that we were really expecting them to have this successful of a season and be a threat this early in the ACC. So, like I said in the beginning, it's pretty much just luck that got us here. We stumbled into the conference championship game and could possibly stumble into the playoffs. But with all that being said, I think our matchups against SMU are a little bit better. I think just their defensive, South Carolina's defensive line had a huge advantage on us, and we were able to neutralize it. I like how Clemson matches up with this team a little bit better. I just think it's going to be high scoring, so I like that. Didn't you pick that for your over this week? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm picking Clemson to win this week. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but there's always something different. This time of year, you break out the orange britches. There's a championship on the line. Just forget about the state championship last week. But there's a championship on the line. This is something that Dabo brainwashes into his teams, that there's these different phases in the season and you handle them differently. And this is usually when Clemson comes out to shine. So I think Clemson's going to win. I think to win, they're going to obviously cover the spread there. And I'm hoping for an exciting game because I was at that god-awful Florida State, who was it, Louisville, that played in the ACC Championship last year. Florida State on their third-string quarterback. It was cold. Neither team could move the ball. It was just absolutely miserable. So I'm looking forward to seeing an offensive game Saturday night in Charlotte.
Yeah, I don't know. My homerism is leaning towards a Clemson win here, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see SMU come out and kind of boat race Clemson a little bit because they've been hot. Competition has not been quite what some of the other teams Clemson has played has been.
Yeah, and referencing that game from last year, I remember leaving the stadium. Florida State fans were just ecstatic for winning. They thought they were getting a playoff berth, and I distinctly remember a Louisville fan on the street. Florida State guy had said something to him, and a Louisville guy was like, "It's all right, y'all aren't making the playoffs anyways." And I just kind of laughed to myself. And I'm like, that would be absolutely hilarious if Florida State doesn't get in. And then lo and behold, Florida State doesn't get in. But as crappy as I felt about it Saturday after the loss to South Carolina, not feeling all that interested or excited about an ACC championship, it's here, it's upon us. I'm looking forward to going. I get only so many Saturdays a year to watch Clemson, so I'm excited, and I'm optimistic. I think the Tigers are going to win this one.
Yeah, I like that attitude, having a little optimism heading into this week. It's a completely different show than last week.
Who would have thought that, especially after the way Tigers lost on Saturday?
Yeah.
But as always, thank you all for listening. Thanks for joining us. And I'm going to hop off here in a little bit. Clemson's got a big basketball game tonight.
And playoff rankings are about to come out right now.
Yeah, Clemson is only a 1.5 dog to Kentucky, number 4 Kentucky, tonight at Little John Coliseum. So I will be watching my first basketball game of the season. I know your dad and Andy will get mad at me when they listen to this if Clemson loses tonight. So, because usually when I pay attention to Clemson basketball, they don't do well. So, but as always, thanks for joining us, and join us next week where we'll talk some ball. Peace.
Peace.